Krishna. Dear devotees, welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books right here in the live studios in Hythe, tucked away in Kent, southeast England, just near the English Channel. And we're very fortunate. We're here kind of tucked away. We're not close to a large devotee community, but we know who God is. As devotees, as followers of Srila Prabhupada, we know who God is. Therefore, whatever's going on in the world or with us, we actually have nothing to complain about because we know who God is. And that's a huge step in the right direction. Okay, Sanatana Goswami glorified the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which is the summum bonum of all truths, the cream of the Vedas. In his Sri Krishna Lila Stava, in verses 412 to 416, he presents Śrīmad-Bhāgavata Mahima Stotram, which is 5 prayers glorifying the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It goes like this: Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha, Sarva Vedaika Satpala, Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja, Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Śrīmad Bhagavata Prabho, Kalidvanduditaditya, Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya, Prema Varshakshadayate, Sarvada Sarvasevyaya, Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who is supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin, Madgudo Man Mahadana, Man Nistadaka Madbhagya, Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu saduta dayin, atini chochatakada, hanamunchagadachin mam, premna rit kantayogspura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so Krishna has graced the Rājasūya sacrifice of Maharaj Yudhisthira and was declared the first person to be worshipped. In other words, the best of all the great personalities who had assembled to witness Maharaj Yudhisthira's great effort to perform the Rājasūya sacrifice, the greatest of all sacrifices. Now we're at chapter 75. Why Duryodhana felt insulted at the end of the Rājasūya sacrifice. King Yudhisthira was known as Ajata Shatru, or a person who had no enemy. Therefore, when all the men, demigods, kings, sages, and saints saw the successful termination of the Rājasūya yajna performed by King Yudhisthira, they were very happy. That Duryodhana alone was unhappy was astonishing to Maharaj Parikshit, and therefore he requested Shukadeva Goswami to explain this. Shukadeva Goswami said, my dear King Parikshit, your grandfather, King Yudhisthira, was a great soul. His congenial disposition attracted everyone to be his friend, and therefore he was known as Ajata Shatru, one who never created an enemy. He engaged all the members of the Kuru dynasty in taking charge of different departments for the management of the Rājasūya sacrifice. For example, Bhimasena was put in charge of the kitchen department, Duryodhana in charge of the supplies department, Sahadeva in charge of the reception department, Nakula in charge of the store department, and Arjuna in charge of looking after the comforts of the elder persons. The most astonishing feature was that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, took charge of washing the feet of all the incoming guests. The queen, the goddess of fortune, Draupadi, was in charge of administering the distribution of food, and because Kṛṣṇa was famous for giving charity, he was put in charge of the charity department. In this way, Satyaki, Vikarna, Hardikya, Vidura, Santardana, Bhurishrava, the son of Balika, were all engaged in different departments for managing the affairs of the Rājasūya sacrifice. They were all so bound in loving affection for King Yudhisthira that they simply wanted to please him. After Shishupal died by the mercy of Lord Krishna and merged into the spiritual existence, and after the end of the Rājasūya yajna, when all the friends, guests, and well-wishers had been fully honored and rewarded, King Yudhisthira went to bathe in the Ganges. The city of Hastinapur stands today on the bank of the Yamuna, and the statement of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that King Yudhisthira went to bathe in the Ganges indicates therefore that during the time of the Pandavas, the river Yamuna was also known as the Ganges. While the king was taking the Avarbrita bath, different musical instruments vibrated, such as mridangas, conch shells, panava drums, kettle drums, and bugles, and the ankle bells of the dancing girls jingled. Many groups of professional singers sang as the venas, flutes, gongs, and cymbals were played, and thus a tumultuous sound vibrated in the sky. The princely guests from many kingdoms, like Srinjaya, Kamboja, Kuru, Kekaya, and Koshala, were present with their different flags and gorgeously decorated elephants, chariots, horses, and soldiers. All of them passed in a procession, with King Yudhisthira in the forefront. The executive members who had performed the sacrifice, the priests, religious ministers, and Brahmanas, all loudly chanted the Vedic hymns. The demigods and the inhabitants of Pitriloka and Gandharvaloka, as well as many sages, showered flowers from the sky. The men and women of Hastinapur, or Indraprastha, their bodies smeared with scents and floral oils, were nicely dressed in colorful garments and decorated with garlands, jewels, and ornaments. Enjoying the ceremony, they threw on one another liquid substances like water, oil, milk, butter, and yogurt. Some even smeared these on each other's bodies. In this way, they enjoyed the occasion. The professional prostitutes jubilantly smeared these liquid substances on the bodies of the men, and the men reciprocated in the same way. All the liquid substances had been mixed with turmeric and saffron, and their color was a lustrous yellow. In order to observe the great ceremony, many wives of the demigods had come in different airplanes, and they were visible in the sky. Similarly, the queens of the royal family, gorgeously dressed, gorgeously decorated, and surrounded by bodyguards, arrived on different palanquins. During this time, Lord Krishna, the maternal cousin of the Pandavas, and his special friend Arjuna, were both throwing the liquid substances on the bodies of the queens. The queens became bashful, but at the same time, their beautiful, smiling, brightened their faces. Because of the liquids thrown on their bodies, the saris covering them became completely wet. The different parts of their beautiful bodies, particularly their breasts and their waists, became partially visible because of the wet cloth. The queens brought buckets of the same liquid substances and with syringes sprinkled them on the bodies of their brothers-in-law. As they engaged in such jubilant activities, their hair fell loose and the flowers decorating their bodies began to fall. When Lord Krishna, Arjuna, and the queens were thus engaged in these jubilant activities, persons who were not clean in heart were agitated by lustful desires. In other words, such behavior between pure males and females is enjoyable, but it makes persons who are materially contaminated become lustful. King Yudhisthira, in a gorgeous chariot yoked to excellent horses, was present there, along with his queens, including Draupadi, and their features were so beautiful that it appeared as if the great Rājasūya sacrifice were standing there in person, along with the different functions of the sacrifice. Following the Rājasūya sacrifice, there was the Vedic ritualistic duty known as Patni Samyaja. This sacrifice, which one performs along with one's wife, was also duly conducted by the priests of King Yudhisthira. As Queen Draupadi and King Yudhisthira were taking their Avabrita bath, the citizens of Hastinapur, as well as the demigods, began to beat on drums and blow trumpets out of feelings of happiness. And there was a shower of flowers from the sky. When the king and the queen finished their bath in the Ganges, all the other citizens, consisting of all the varnas or castes, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, took their baths in the Ganges. The Brahmanas, bathing in the Ganges is recommended in the Vedic literature because by such bathing one is freed from all sinful reactions. This is still current in India, especially at particularly auspicious moments. At such times, millions of people bathe in the Ganges. After taking his bath, King Yudhisthira, dressed in a new silken cloth and wrapper, and decorated himself with valuable jewelry. The king not only dressed himself and decorated himself, but also gave clothing and ornaments to all the priests and the others who had participated in the yagyas. In this way, he worshipped them all. He constantly worshipped his friends, his family members, his relatives, his well-wishers, and everyone present. And because he was a Vaishnava, a great devotee of Lord Narayana, he knew how to treat everyone else. The great read this again. He constantly worshipped his friends, his family members, his relatives, his well-wishers, and everyone present. And because he was a Vaishnava, a great devotee of Lord Narayana, he knew how to treat everyone well. The Mayavadi philosophers endeavor to see everyone as God, as an artificial attempt at oneness. But a Vaishnava, or a devotee of Lord Narayana, sees every living entity as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, a Vaishnava's treatment of other living entities is on the absolute platform. As one cannot treat one part of his body differently from another part, because they all belong to the same body, a Vaishnava does not see a human being as distinct from an animal, because in both he sees the soul and the super soul seated together. When everyone was refreshed after bathing and was dressed in silken clothing, with jeweled earrings, flower garlands, turbans, long wrappers, and pearl necklaces, they looked altogether like the demigods from heaven. This was especially true of the women, who were very nicely dressed, each wore a golden belt around the waist. They were all smiling, with spots of tilak and curling hair scattered here and there. This combination was very attractive. Those persons who had participated in the Rājasūya sacrifice, including the most cultured priests, the Brahmanas, who had assisted the citizens of all the Varnas, and the kings, demigods, sages, saints, and citizens of Pitriloka, were all very much satisfied by the dealings of King Yudhisthira, and at the end they happily departed for their residences. While returning to their homes, they talked of the dealings of King Yudhisthira, and even after continuous talk of his greatness, they were not satiated, just as one may drink nectar over and over again and never be satisfied. After the departure of all the others, Maharaj Yudhisthira restrained the inner circle of his friends, including Lord Krishna, not allowing them to leave. Lord Krishna could not refuse the request of the king. Krishna therefore sent back all the heroes of the Yadu dynasty, Samba and others. All of them returned to Dwarka, and Lord Krishna personally remained to give pleasure to the king. In the material world, everyone has a particular type of desire to be fulfilled, but one is never able to fulfill his desires to his full satisfaction. But King Yudhisthira, because of his unflinching devotion to Krishna, could fulfill all his desires successfully by the performance of the Rājasūya sacrifice. From the description of the Rājasūya yajna, such a function appears to be a great ocean of opulent desires. Such an ocean is not possible for an ordinary man to cross. Nevertheless, by the grace of Lord Krishna, King Yudhisthira was able to cross it very easily, and thus he became freed from all anxieties. When Duryodhana saw that Maharaj Yudhisthira had become very famous after performing the Rājasūya yajna and was fully satisfied in every respect, he began to burn with the fire of envy, because his mind was always poisonous. For one thing, he envied the imperial palace constructed by the demon Maya for the Pandavas. The palace was excellent in its puzzling artistic workmanship and was befitting the position of great princes, kings, or leaders of the demons. In that great palace, the Pandavas lived with their family members, and Queen Draupadi served her husbands very peacefully. And because in those days Lord Krishna was also there, the palace was also decorated by his thousands of queens. When the queens, with their heavy breasts and thin waists, moved within the palace, and their ankle bells rang very melodiously with their movement, the whole palace appeared more opulent than the heavenly kingdom. Because a portion of their breasts was sprinkled with saffron powder, the pearl necklaces on their breasts appeared reddish. With their beautiful earrings and flowing hair, the queens appeared very attractive. After seeing such beauties in the palace of King Yudhisthira, Duryodhana was envious. He was especially envious and lustful upon seeing the beauty of Draupadi, because he had cherished a special attraction for her from the very beginning of her marriage with the Pandavas. In the marriage selection assembly of Draupadi, Duryodhana had also been present, and along with other princes, he had been very much captivated by the beauty of Draupadi, but he had failed to achieve her. Once upon a time, King Yudhisthira was sitting on his golden throne in the palace constructed by the demon Maya. His 4 brothers and other relatives, as well as his great well-wisher Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, were present, and the material opulence of King Yudhisthira seemed no less than that of Lord Brahma. When he was sitting on the throne, surrounded by his friends, and the reciters were offering prayers to him in the form of nice songs, Duryodhana came to the palace with his younger brothers. Duryodhana was decorated with a helmet, and he carried a sword in his hand. He was always in an envious and angry mood, and therefore, on a slight provocation, he spoke sharply with the doorkeepers and became angry. By the craftsmanship of the demon Maya, the palace was so decorated in different places that one who did not know the tricks would consider water to be land and land to be water. Duryodhana was illusioned by this craftsmanship, and when crossing water, thinking it to be land, he fell in. When Duryodhana, out of his foolishness, had thus fallen, the queens enjoyed the incident by laughing. King Yudhisthira could understand the feelings of Duryodhana, and he tried to restrain the queens, but Lord Krishna indicated that King Yudhisthira should not restrain them from enjoying the incident. Krishna desired that Duryodhana be fooled in that way, and that all of them enjoy his foolish behavior. When everyone laughed, Duryodhana felt very insulted, and his bodily hairs stood up in anger. Being thus insulted, he immediately left the palace, bowing his head. He was silent and did not protest. When Duryodhana left in such an angry mood, everyone regretted the incident, and King Yudhisthira also was very sorry. But despite all these occurrences, Krishna was silent. He did not say anything against or in favor of the incident. It appeared that Duryodhana had been put into illusion by the supreme will of Lord Krishna, and this was the beginning of the enmity between the 2 sects of the Kuru dynasty. This appeared to be a part of Krishna's plan in his mission to decrease the burden of the world. King Parikshit had inquired from Shukadeva Goswami why Duryodhana was not satisfied after the termination of the great Rājasūya sacrifice, and thus it was explained by Shukadeva Goswami. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 75th chapter of Krishna, why Duryodhana felt insulted at the end of the Rājasūya sacrifice. All glories to the unlimited opulence of Maharaj Yudhisthira. All glories to his personality, which could not see an enemy in anyone. All glories to Sri Krishna, who was winding Duryodhana up. Okay. Here we go. Chapter 76. The battle between Shalva and members of the Yadu dynasty. While Shukadeva Goswami was narrating various activities of Lord Krishna in playing the role of an ordinary human being, he also narrated the history of the battle between the dynasty of Yadu and a demon of the name Shalva, who had managed to possess a wonderful airship named Soba. King Shalva. I just got a message from Giriraj Maharaj. Just me check it real quickly. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to read that important letter from Giriraj Swami. King Shalva was a great friend of Shishupal's. When Shishupal went to marry Rukmini, Shalva was one of the members of the bridegroom's party. In the fight between the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty and the kings of the opposite side, Shalva was defeated by the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty. But despite his defeat, he made a promise before all the kings that he would in the future rid the whole world of all the members of the Yadu dynasty. Since his defeat in the fight during the marriage of Rukmini, he had maintained within himself an unforgettable envy of Lord Krishna, and he was, in fact, a fool because he had promised to kill Krishna. Usually, such foolish demons take shelter of a demigod like Lord Shiva to execute their ulterior plans. And so in order to get strength, Shalva took refuge at the lotus feet of Lord Shiva. He underwent a severe type of austerity, during which he would eat no more than a handful of ashes daily. Lord Shiva, the husband of Parvati, is generally very merciful, and he is very quickly satisfied if someone undertakes severe austerities to please him. So after continued austerities by Shalva, for 1 year, Lord Shiva became pleased with him and asked him to beg for a fulfillment of his desire, for the fulfillment of his desire. Shalva begged from Lord Shiva the gift of an airplane that would be so strong that it could not be destroyed by any demigod, demon, human being, Gandharva, or Naga, or even any Rakshasa. Moreover, he desired that the airplane be able to fly anywhere and everywhere he would like to pilot it, and be specifically very dangerous and fearful to the dynasty of the Yadus. Lord Shiva immediately agreed to give him the benediction, and Shalva took the help of the demon Maya to manufacture this iron airplane, which was so strong and formidable that no one could crash it. It was a very big machine, almost like a big city, and it could fly so high and at such a great speed that it was almost impossible to see. So there was no question of attacking it. It appeared to be almost covered with darkness, yet the pilot could fly it anywhere and everywhere. Having acquired such a wonderful airplane, Shalva flew it to the city of Dwarka because his main purpose in obtaining the airplane was to attack the city of the Yadus, toward whom he maintained a constant feeling of animosity. Shalva thus attacked the city of Dwarka from the sky, and he also surrounded the city by a large number of infantry. The soldiers on the surface attacked the beautiful spots of the city. They began to destroy the nice parks, the city gates, the palaces and skyscraper houses, the high walls around the city, and the beautiful spots where people would gather for recreation. While the soldiers attacked on the surface, the airplane began to drop big slabs of stone, tree trunks, thunderbolts, poisonous snakes, and many other dangerous things. Shalva also managed to create such a strong whirlwind within the city that all of Dwarka became dark because of the dust that covered the sky. The airplane occupied by Shalva put the entire city of Dwarka into distress equal to that caused the airplane occupied by Shalva put the entire city of Dwarka into distress equal to that caused on the earth long, long ago by the disturbing activities of Tripurasura. The inhabitants of Dwarkapuri became so harassed that they were not peaceful for even a moment. The great heroes of Dwarka city, headed by commanders such as Pradyumna, counteracted the soldiers and airplane of Shalva. When Pradyumna saw the extreme distress of the citizens, he immediately arranged his soldiers and personally got up in a chariot, encouraging the citizens by assuring safety. Following his command, many warriors like Satyaki, Charodeshna, and Samba, all younger brothers of Pradyumna, as well as Akrura, Kritavarma, Bauvinda, Gada, Shuka, and Sarana, all came out of the city to fight with Shalva. All of them were Maharatis, great warriors, able to fight with thousands of men. All were fully equipped with necessary weapons and assisted by hundreds and thousands of charioteers, elephants, horses, and infantry soldiers. Fierce fighting began between the two parties, exactly like that formerly carried on between the demigods and the demons. The fighting was severe, and whoever observed the fierce nature of the fight felt his bodily hairs stand on end. Pradyumna immediately counteracted the mystic demonstration occasioned by the airplane of Shalva, the king of Salva. By the mystic power of the airplane, Shalva had created a darkness as dense as night. But Pradyumna, all of a sudden, appeared like the rising sun. As with the rising of the sun, the darkness of night is immediately dissipated. With the appearance of Pradyumna, the power exhibited by Shalva became null and void. Each of Pradyumna's arrows had a golden feather at the end, and the shaft was fitted with a sharp iron head. By releasing 25 such arrows, Pradyumna severely injured Shalva's commander-in-chief. He then released another 100 arrows toward the body of Shalva. After this, he pierced each and every shoulder by releasing 1 arrow. He killed the chariot drivers by firing 10 arrows at each of them, and he killed the carriers like the horses and elephants by releasing 3 arrows directed toward each one. When everyone present on the battlefield saw this wonderful feat of Pradyumna's, the great fighters on both sides praised his acts of chivalry. But still, the airplane occupied by Shalva was very mysterious. It was so extraordinary that sometimes many airplanes would appear to be in the sky, and sometimes there were apparently none. Sometimes the plane was visible, and sometimes not visible. And the warriors of the Yadu dynasty were puzzled about the whereabouts of the peculiar airplane. Sometimes they would see the airplane on the ground, sometimes flying in the sky, sometimes resting on the peak of a hill, and sometimes floating on the water. The wonderful airplane flew in the sky like a whirling firebrand. It was not steady even for a moment. But despite the mysterious maneuvering of the airplane, the commanders and soldiers of the Yadu dynasty would immediately rush toward Shalva, wherever he was present, with his airplane and soldiers. The arrows released by the dynasty of the Yadus were as brilliant as the sun, and as dangerous as the tongues of serpents. All the soldiers fighting on behalf of Shalva soon became distressed by the incessant release of arrows upon them by the heroes of the Yadu dynasty, and Shalva himself became unconscious from the attack of these arrows. The soldiers fighting on behalf of Shalva were also very strong, and the release of their arrows also harassed the heroes of the Yadu dynasty. But still, the Yadus were so strong and determined that they did not move from their strategic positions. The heroes of the Yadu dynasty were determined either to die on the battlefield or to gain victory. They were confident that if they died in the fighting, they would attain a heavenly planet, and if they came out victorious, they would enjoy the world. The name of Shalva's commander-in-chief was Juman. He was very powerful, and although bitten by 25 of Pradyumna's arrows, he suddenly attacked Pradyumna with his fierce club and struck him so strongly that Pradyumna became unconscious. Immediately there was a roaring, "Now he is dead! Now he is dead!" The force of the club on Pradyumna's chest was very severe, and it appeared as though his chest had been torn asunder. Pradyumna's chariot was being driven by the son of Daruka. According to Vedic military principles, the chariot driver and the hero on the chariot must cooperate during the fighting. As such, because it was the duty of the chariot driver to take care of the hero on the chariot during the dangerous and precarious fighting, Daruka's son removed Pradyumna from the battlefield. 2 hours later, in a quiet place, Pradyumna regained consciousness, and when he saw that he was in a place other than the battlefield, he addressed the charioteer and condemned him. "Oh, you have done the most abominable act. Why have you removed me from the battlefield?" "My dear charioteer, I have never heard that any of our family members was ever moved from the battlefield. None of them left the battlefield while fighting. By this removal, you have overburdened me with a great defamation. It will be said that I left the battlefield while fighting was going on. My dear charioteer, I must accuse you. You are a coward and emasculator. Tell me, how can I go before my uncle Balarama and my father Krishna, and what shall I say to them? Everyone will talk about me and say that I fled from the fighting place, and if they inquire from me about this, what will be my reply? My sisters-in-law will play jokes on me with sarcastic words. My dear hero, how have you become such a coward? How have you become a eunuch? How have you become so low in the eyes of the fighters who opposed you? I think, my dear charioteer, that you have committed a great offense by removing me from the battlefield. The charioteer of Pradyumna replied, My dear sir, I wish a long life for you. I think that I did nothing wrong, for it is the duty of the charioteer to help the fighter in the chariot when he is in a precarious condition. My dear sir, you were completely competent in the battlefield, but you are completely competent in the battlefield, but it is the duty of the charioteer and the warrior to protect each other in a precarious condition. I was completely aware of the regulated principles of fighting, and I did my duty. The enemy all of a sudden suddenly struck you with his club so severely that you lost consciousness. You were in a dangerous position, surrounded by your enemies. Therefore, I was obliged to act as I did. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 67th chapter of Krishna, the battle between Shalva and members of the Yadu dynasty. All glories to Pradyumna, that great warrior and loyal son of Krishna, and also one of the Chaturvyuha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. And all glories to the chariot driver of Pradyumna, who was so loyal to protect his master. Okay, it's almost 8 o'clock. We were able to read 2 chapters by 8 o'clock. That's very good. So we'll stop the reading there and pray for the Vaishnavas present to give us their reflections and comments and discussions. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
First is from Devadharana.
Hare Krishna Devadharana. She's got first up the block a lot lately.
Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances.
Hare Krishna, mine to you.
All glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda.
All glories to Prabhupada.
And from Vilas Manjari Dasi.
Vilas Manjari. Hari Bo.
She says, Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna to you too.
From Gopakanya.
Hare Krishna Gopakanya Devi Dasi.
She says, Jai Maharaj, Hare Krishna. All glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda in your daily reading service of Krishna Katha.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj.
May I continue forever. Thank you.
From Bhakti Noel.
Hare Krishna Bhakti Noel.
She says, Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances.
Jai, all glories to Prabhupada.
I am so pleased to tell you I am tuning in today from New Vrindavan Dham.
Oh, nice.
I feel infinitely grateful that the seed of Krishna consciousness was planted. Glorious to hear you from here. All glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda.
Jai, all glories to Prabhupada. All glories to New Vrindavan. Hari Bo.
Something from Daityari Haridas.
Daitya Hari Dhari. Daitya Hari Hari.
He says, Hare Krishna Maharaj, thanks for taking us all along with you with these readings. It's a privilege to hear these books spoken by someone with a genuine taste for them.
I pray that your words will come true.
It was really nice hearing about Yudhisthira's dealings with Krishna in the previous chapters and hearing of his dealings with everyone else tonight. The genuine expressions of love for Krishna and kind dealings with everyone else are beyond anything I can conceive of in most of my own interpersonal experiences. Normally, because of my envy, I often cringe at the thought of expressions of appreciation for devotees, and feel fake doing it. I actually, unfortunately, can relate to Duryodhana more easily, because his character more resembles my own, and therefore something I can conceive of. I find myself humiliated and outdone by others around me on many levels, and often feel like a wretch who is unhappy to see others excelling and me failing.
Hare Krishna, humility is breaking our hearts.
However, these readings, seeing how you relate to others in such a genuinely loving way, and the expressions of affection from the devotees toward you, increases my faith that people like Yudhisthira existed and had those genuine feelings for Krishna. Because there's a daily reference point in these readings that I can see for myself where similar feelings are expressed in a genuine.
Hare Krishna, so be it. This is the real joy of life, to associate with the Vaishnavas and hear together the glories of Krishna, Krishna consciousness, in Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for that wonderful reflection. So, Hare Krishna. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai. Wait a second, we've got a last minute ecstasy over here.
From Anandamurti Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna Anandamurti.
She says, Dear Guru Maharaj and all devotees, please accept my respectful obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much for reading of Srila Prabhupada's books. Those descriptions are so easy to understand by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and you. It is amazing that even Lord Krishna took role to wash the feet of the guests at the Rājasūya Yajna. How amazing the pastime of the Lord acts as a human being.
Yes, this is Nara Leela, and it is extraordinary because he acts like an ordinary human being, but he acts in a more wonderful way than any other human being ever has and ever will. Even when he was acting as an ordinary human being under the principles of the laws of nature that he himself created, he does everything in such a wonderful way. It's just extraordinary, completely extraordinary. I too was struck with wonder with how Lord Maharaj Yudhisthira felt affection for everyone and how he cared for everyone. Even Duryodhana. He still, he wanted the wives and the ladies to stop laughing at him when he fell in the water, thinking it was land. But Krishna, he went, that's okay, it's all right, it's all right. Because he was so tricky and so expert. He wanted to wind him up because he knew that if he wound him up enough, eventually the battle of Kurukshetra would clean the house, remove the burden of the earth from all these very, very powerful demons and even demigods that came to duke it out on the earth, to fight on the earth. So Krishna attracts everybody. He's all attractive. He attracts the best and he attracts the worst, and therefore it's so exciting. His life is so exciting. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. See you tomorrow night, same time, same place, same topic. The ever-expanding and marvelous pastimes of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna. See you tomorrow night. Hari Bol.